Okay, welcome everyone. We can go ahead and get started. So hello and good afternoon. My name is John Dodds, and I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Kencor Elevator Systems, which is an American elevator group company. I'm also the chair of the NAEC Member Services Committee, and I want to welcome everyone to this fourth quarter town hall discussion in what has become a series of dialogues with various leaders within the vertical transportation industry. These conversations have focused on topics that have been identified by NAEC members as important and significant ones for their business. The topics for the town hall sessions have been assembled from various sources, and the topics range from immediate needs that you face daily to the longer term objectives relating to successfully sustaining your businesses. The Member Services Committee is always looking for feedback on this series of events, so please be on the lookout for an all-member survey that will be sent to you over the coming weeks so that we can gain feedback from you about future topics that you would like to see covered during these town halls. At the conclusion of this event, it will be the end of the second year that we've been bringing these to you. So we want to make sure that our topics next year continue to be relevant to our entire membership. So please take the time to provide your input when you see the survey. As a reminder, all of our town hall series event recordings, including this one, are available by logging into naec.org. It's located under industry events and then by clicking on the town hall series. I'm going to ask Lori or Danielle to put the link in the chat for reference. Finally, if you have any feedback for the Member Services Committee, please reach out to Lori Wolking at lori@naec.org. Today's topic is about job costing. Simply put, the goal of all of us in the elevator industry is to be profitable. Unfortunately, we find that is the only simple thing about that goal. Do you know how much it costs your businesses to complete a project? What we find is that anyone can sell or guesstimate a job. We can always find someone to perform the work, but in order to understand which jobs are profitable and which jobs are not, it's imperative that you have a proper job cost tracking system. A job costing system is the entire process of accumulating information regarding the total costs associated with a project. What we are going to delve into the job costing process, which starts with a correct job takeoff, a good estimate, and a specification review, up through an exact job costing accounting review. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to provide a few updates on important NAEC activities. On January 24th and 25th, we will be holding the next in our series of regional workshops, and this one will be held in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Like the others, this regional workshop will focus on accredited technical training and code compliance information. The same workshop will be offered on 2 days, with the same presentations being offered on both days. Each day offers 8 hours of continuing education credit that can be applied for state licensing CEUs and CET renewals. We also have 2 upcoming QEI prep class workshops. The first will be held on January 3rd, located in Westchester, PA, at the Kencor offices, and the second will be held January 26th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is immediately following the regional workshop. In these workshops, you will learn how to navigate code books, read questions, and decide which resources to utilize when you prepare for the Qualified Elevator Inspector exam. You will have an opportunity to earn 8 hours of CE credits too. So please go to NAEC website for more information and to register for these workshops. NAEC's Spring Educational Conference will take place April 16th through 19th at the Waikuloa Marriott in Waikuloa Village, Hawaii, and promises to be a great opportunity for members and their families. The meeting will feature first-rate educational sessions planned with a schedule that will allow members to enjoy the exciting activities Hawaii has to offer, all while gaining knowledge to take back to the office. We have secured great hotel rates for our members, so please be sure to take advantage. Registration opens this week, so please be on the lookout for more information. The Next Gen Conference will take place May 22nd through 25th at the Graduate Hotel located in Nashville, Tennessee, and promises to be a great opportunity for the next generation of leaders who are stepping up to drive change and innovation in our industry. Registration will open in December. As a former member of this group, I can attest to the value that it can bring. If you have individuals in your organization who are under 40, I encourage you to get them involved. NAEC is hosting a new member drive this month and through the end of the year. During this time, NAEC is encouraging current members to reach out to their contacts who may not be a current member of NAEC and encourage them to join the membership. The current NAEC member who recruits the most new members during the drive will receive a complimentary membership during the membership year of 2023. There will also be a drawing for new members who join NAEC during this time, and the winner will receive a free full-page article in the next NAEC mainline that will highlight the company and its products. Okay, so now it's time to move forward with the town hall event. Apologies to our audience. I'm coming to you from a remote location. This is not the normal backdrop, so please bear with the 1970s Atlantic City attire that I have behind me. When our presentations have finished their presentation, we're going to answer as many questions from the audience as we can. So as you have questions, please write them in the Q&A window, and we're going to circle back to as many of them as time allows at the end of the event. As always, we're going to try to make sure we are mindful of everyone's time and have this wrapped up today no later than 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. Now I want to introduce our first speaker, Chris Flynn. Chris has served in a sales and engineering role for 21 years and works for Canton Elevator Nidec Elevator Group. Canton Elevator manufactures packages for both hydraulic and traction applications. Canton is also a custom cab manufacturer, which manufactures all cabs for their packages and provides individual components. Chris's daily workload includes quoting projects, using specifications and architectural drawings, and communicating with customers and architects to make sure the correct information for a project is being quoted or used on that specific project. Chris, it's great to see you, my friend. Thanks for taking the time to join us. And Chris has graciously kept his commitment to this town hall event. He's severely under the weather. So Chris, we really do appreciate you joining us, and I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, John. And thanks to the NAEC for having me. I really do appreciate it. And for anybody that's listening, if I have to cough, I apologize ahead of time. So basically what I'm here to speak of is reading specifications and architectural drawings, as John pointed out. But also to go over a sample spec and some drawings, just to kind of point some things out that you may have seen or may not have seen that we all need to be make our customers aware of. I know one of my most uncomfortable conversations to have with a customer is that you missed a specified item. That missed item ends up costing not only your company, the manufacturer, but also your customer monies. The end result is we all need to make money to stay in business. So that's the name of the game. As a manufacturer, we are in the business of making money. Your customers are there to do the same. The ultimate goal when reading a spec and or architectural drawings is to either quote what is specified or communicate with your customer what you are not quoting. I'll give you some examples of that too. There are instances where the specifications and or architectural drawings just don't match up. It may be something as simple as travel, or it may be something as severe as the number of stops and openings, the opening orientation. Is it inline or is it front and rear? In either case, it's your job, the spec reader, to convey to your customer what you're taking exceptions to or deviating from. By doing this, you are allowing your customer to let their customers know what they are proposing. We here at Canton do this in multiple ways. We either call out a specific section of the spec to what we are doing, or it may be as simple as picking up the phone, having a phone conversation with your customer, and then following up with an email on how your customer wants you to proceed. In either way, it is a communication that will ultimately help your customer land the job and the job go as smoothly as possible with a monetary profit for both you and your customer. If something's missed down the road, engineer picks it up, and they got to have the conversation with you. You got to have the conversation with the customer. It's kind of one of those things where you just try to pick it up at the beginning so that the job goes smoothly down the road. Here are some notable spec items that I've came across over my years of doing this that may help you. I kind of broke it down a little bit easier for you. Let's see here. There we go. Notable spec items. Most specifications are boilerplate, which I'm sure everybody's kind of aware of. Sometimes those are not fully geared for your specific job that you're working on. So the following items that need to be clarified to your customer, or may need to be clarified to your customer. Type of hydraulic jack system or traction application. Is it a machine room or is it machine room less? So when you're reading the spec, you're going to try to decipher, is it hydraulic, is it traction, or did your customer send you a traction spec and ask you to quote it as a hydraulic? That has happened quite a bit. So when that happens, you're reading the spec, you just call out the section in the spec, which again, I'll go over, that is noting to the customer that you are quoting a hydraulic application and not a traction. Travel. Does this differ from the architectural drawings? So in other words, the specs may say it's 12 foot of travel, but you look at the architectural drawings and it says 16 feet. So you got to pick a path on which way you're going to go. But in the end, it's the communication between you and your customer of what you should deviate from or pass along to them so that they can do their due diligence. How many number of stops and openings? Does this differ from the architectural drawings? Again, are the openings inline or front and rear? Does the capacity specified, the clear inside car allow for the specified capacity? So I know I've had this happen where a spec will say 4,000 pounds. And after you're all done and said, and you figure out the clear inside car dimension that's based off of the architectural drawings, it ends up being a 6,000 pound car. So what you would want to do at that point is either again, pick up the phone and contact the customer and explain to them the situation, or else you put on your comment sheet, this is what I did. I deviated from the spec, give the clear inside car dimension and note it to them so that they can, again, address it with their customer. Clear hoistway width and depth. Will the specified capacity work with the architectural drawings? Will additional clear hoistway width and depth be required for the specified capacity? So what that's basically saying is that if it's, let's say you need some extra space on your hoistway to accommodate the hydraulic jacks, then you need to clarify that, or again, deviate from the architectural drawings and advise your customer, this is what's actually going to be required. That way, again, everything is passed on, and you're hoping that all these notes that you're advising your customer, that they will capture and that they will pass along to their customer also.
Hey,
Power
Chris.
units, is it a submersible or belt drive?
Hey, Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris. Are you, did you want to share your presentation?
I do. Is it not presenting?
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
It's clear on my end. Let me take a look here. And that's my apologies.
No, you're good. I want to interrupt you.
No, I appreciate you doing that. Yep, there we go. Are we good?
Yep, we're good. Thank you.
Sorry about all that.
Sorry about that.
No. Thank you. going back to power units and power unit types, sometimes a spec will call out for it to be a belt drive. You can do one of two things. You can quote it as a belt drive as specified, or else you can change it over to a submersible. But again, you want to clarify that to your customer of what you are actually doing. I guess the whole gist of this is communication. Communicating between you and your customer in the end will make the job go much more smoother. Moving on to controller manufacturers. Sometimes the controller manufacturer is specified, sometimes it's not. That's where you have to know what your customer would actually want. Either be a certain manufacturer or in this day and age, a type of controller. Wiring. Are there any additional shielded pair or coax cable that's specified? That is another thing that you need to be aware of in a spec to make sure that those items are quoted. The door type and size. Does the specified door width and type match the architectural drawings? I know a lot of architects they just have a certain type that's in their queue, and they'll put in it'll show 2-speed doors, where in reality the specs are calling out for single speed doors. That's what it's a simple note as saying single speed doors quoted, not 2-speed. Emergency power. Is battery lowering are required? Generator power. Those two items are sort of big ticket items that you want to make sure that you're looking at. I forgot to stress this when reading a spec. I know, and no offense, but I know a lot of people they'll use like a search engine. I'm not personally, I'm not a big fan of that. I just know that sometimes things can get missed. I know we're all busy and we're trying to get as much done as possible, but it is a good practice if you want to continue to use your search engine, use it, but still continue to read the spec. It will be helpful to not only you in the end, but also to your customer. How many elevators? Are they duplex, simplex, group operation? These are all things that may deviate from a spec to an architectural drawing. What is the required state code? That not in this day and age, that could be pretty big. So we need to make sure what the actual code is and what we are to quote. Are there any interior CAD specifications that, or does the spec ask for a reference drawing? I know a lot of specs will call out that it'll say see architectural drawings, something as simple as that. You may not have that. Easiest thing to do, call the customer and see if they have it. If they don't have it, just call out that section and say it's did not have this this drawing to quote the cap, or any finishes for that example. It may go on to talk about the entrances. And again, number 15, are there any entrance finish specifications, or does the spec ask to reference drawings? Well, again, I guess everybody kind of understands that sometimes the specifications state one thing, but there are ARC drawings that show something different. Make sure you call out and deviate that from that section and just advise the customer of what you are doing. That will be greatly helpful, not only to you, but to them down the road. So now I have an example of a spec. Hopefully this helps. Can you see my screen now, John? Sorry.
We can. We're still good.
Thank you. All right. So we have a sample spec and we have architectural drawings. So I went through and highlighted some items. So we got a holeless jack, holeless hydraulic system. I always reflect on the architectural drawings just to make sure that they are calling out for what is specified. Sometimes this will say holeless, but it will show on the drawing, it will show a piston coming down through the center of the hoistway. Well, that's a good question to ask the customer. Should this be a holeless or should it be an in-ground jack? And speaking to the customer, they will be able to advise you of how they want you to proceed. What's some other items that I highlighted here? Sill support angles. So we have, as simple as that sounds, sill support angles is your standard traditional setup for your entrances. Some customers want it grouted, some want it groutless, or some of them want a tower. With that being said, what I would do if your customer prefers anything other than a sill support angle, call out that section. And the way I do that is I'll say section 2.3, 2.3G, tower construction or whatever groutless quoted for that section. That's a big one I see nowadays. Battery operated emergency. So where the key word here is if. So it's saying if battery operated emergency power is required. Further on down in the spec, typically it'll call out for in another section whether it is actually required or not. If it's not mentioned further on in the spec, come back to the section and call out that battery operated emergency operation is, or battery lowering to abbreviate, is not quoted. This way your customer doesn't get in a bind down the road through their customer that battery operation should have been provided. Or you can do the alternative and quote it and call out that it may be a deduct if this is actually not required. So that is a practice that your company may have. It depends on how you guys want to handle it, but those are two different ways to address that issue. Let's see here. Remote machine room or remote panels. So it's almost like a question here. So this is where I would go back and reflect upon the architectural drawings. Well, it clearly shows that the elevator, the machine room, is adjacent to the hoistway. So what I would do is call out that section and specify that an adjacent machine room at the lowest landing was quoted. Again, communication, that is the key. Let's see here, applicable seismics. We want to make sure that we know what seismic zone that the project is located in. Samples. We call out here at Canton that we can provide samples if upon request, and we call out this section. The reason being is that vendors nowadays, and the way our society is right now, it's really difficult to get some samples. You may have some on hand in your own manufacturing facility, but most of the time you don't have what's specified. That's always the rule. So we just call it out, and we can provide them down the road, but we make sure that the customer knows that those are not included in the quote. Let's see here. All right, lots of red lines. This is pretty typical of what I do when I read a spec, is I highlight and I call things out. In this case, just to kind of point some things out, looking at the plan view of each elevator, they both look pretty identical, but one of the elevators is 4,500 pounds, the other one's a 2,500. So what do? You either have to deviate from the 4,500 pound and call it out and quote it as a 3,500 pound if some other information tells you, gives you more information to what you should be doing. Again, going to overhead, making sure it matches up with the drawings, pit depth, making sure, travel, making sure, et cetera, et cetera. So we look at everything, number of stops, like I said earlier, down to the clear inside car dimension, down to finishes. This one's calling out for powder coat. Does your supplier for the entrances provide powder coat, or do they provide enamel? That's something you also may need to call out. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to close this out. I truly apologize. Just like I said previously, whenever you're deviating from the specifications or the architectural drawing, it is in the best interest of the customer, excuse me, to call out the spec section. I can't stress that enough. and to advise them what you are quoting. It is then up to your customer to relay that information to their customer. This is the one way to help with possible future change notices, which impacts your company's profit and customers' total costings for the project. It's also a great way to earn trust. They do look at you for guidance. So it is not a bad thing to, again, pick up the phone, make that point of contact and figure out what's the best direction for not only you, but for your customer. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate it.
You got it, Chris. And if you don't mind, just a reminder to the group, any questions, put them in a Q&A window and we'll try to come back to them when we can. But I just have a question or two for you, Chris, while you're
Yes,
kind of getting through there. So you spent a lot of time talking about kind of the discrepancies between the various documents. So the first question, and I'm going to start this by saying from your perspective, because I looked in our participant window and we've got a really good eclectic kind of group of contractors, suppliers, and even consultants with us today. So from your perspective, who is ultimately responsible when something specified it's going to affect you as the manufacturer, me as the contractor, maybe the consultant? Who's responsible? I mean, this is ultimately affecting someone's profit margin. What are your thoughts on that?
I know I personally take pride in what I do. So I look at, I can't speak for everybody, but from my standpoint, I say it's the spec reader that is ultimately responsible for what is missed and what's not deviated to the customer. I don't always rely on the customer to know everything. I don't. There are some that can pick up things. There are some that don't, but they don't. It's like everything else. If you do it over and over and over again, you get that. But if you don't do it over and over again, it is ultimately up to the spec reader to capture what is in the spec. Now, let's say that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, you're fine.
I will say that if something is missed and it is brought up down the road, either by one of our engineering team or by the customer, or it may be as simple as the drawings come back to us, blighted up or ratted up or marked up, and something is noted on there. Well, guess what? They noted something that was in a spec. So then you just have the conversation. Again, it's communication. Sometimes you can work it out, sometimes you can't. There's a lot of things in specs that truthfully are not needed. And that's not my viewpoint. Because these are boilerplate specs, they're not always geared for a specific project. So it's really tough sometimes to determine what is actually needed. That's the tough question. It really is. The best thing to do, communicate. If you have a spec that's just listing, let's say, I'll give you an example. You have a lower capacity elevator and it's specified that they want loadway. Not necessarily is that needed, but that's a boilerplate spec that you're reading. So you can either deviate from that and just call it out from the beginning, or you can just overlook it. But in the end, that's going to come back and bite you. So that's how I look at it, but I can't speak for everybody.
And to follow up, you were kind of going through, some of the discrepancies between, like the spec and the architectural drawing. So is there like a hierarchical relationship between those documents? Like with code, when we have a disconnect, there's a hierarchy, right? So do the specs supersede the architecturals or vice versa?
I say my rule of thumb is they're going to build it to the architectural drawings. They're not necessarily going to build it to the specifications, because there's a lot of thought process that goes into architectural drawings. Not saying that thought process isn't into the specs, but lesser than what's in the architectural drawings. Somebody has to really think through the process of, hey, will this door size fit in this wasteway? Or will this application either be a hydro or traction fit into this wasteway? So my personal opinion is that the architectural drawings supersede the specs.
Excellent.
You gotta remember,
Chris, I want to thank you.
oh, real quick. You got to remember the specifications is one thing, the architectural drawings is another. You have more details from a standpoint of finishes and features in the specifications that you do the architecturals. So they you got to work together on this. But the bottom line is communicate with customers.
Yeah, and obviously, try to catch those discrepancies up front, right? And get it out of the way before you go into production.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, I really want to thank you and appreciate your time for joining us today. I know you're kind of feeling under the weather here. Thanks for kind of honoring your commitment and trying to stick it through. So
you're very welcome.
Appreciate that.
I appreciate you asking me.
And now we are going to move over to our second panelist, John Toller. John Toller is a second-generation elevator man with over 40 years of experience in the industry. He began his career in Houston with Dover Hunter Hayes Elevator as a probationary helper. Working his way up as a salesman, he performed district sales and was a branch manager and a district manager. He has 25 years working with the majors as well. In his current position, John is general manager at United Elevator Services, LLC, located in Knoxville, Tennessee. John was elected to the board of directors of NAEC and just recently was installed as our president. John, very good to see you. Thanks for taking the time to join us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. And thank you all for taking time out of your day to come to this town hall. I hope there's some interesting things for you. Over the years, as a salesman and an estimator, and then as an instructor and someone who has hired and taught new equipment sales, I've spent a lot of time just talking to competitors and other elevator salespeople, and everybody's got their own way of doing things. And some of them are a little embarrassing. And I'm sure somewhere out there, we still have people who that's their estimate. Just written on, now this is written on a paper towel. Most of the ones I've ever seen were written on a bar nap. And that's how they did it. Up until before COVID, I could probably tell you what almost any bid was going to be before I did it, because I've just done so many. And even though I don't quote anymore, I check a lot of drawings. So I had a general idea. But to do it right, you need to have a good estimate. You need to set it up so you can account for all the different features of that. And then it will bleed into what Karen's going to talk about, doing the cost accounting on it. Are you making money? But I need to tag on what Chris was talking about, because if you're going to send off your drawings and specs to a vendor to bid for you, or if you're bidding on your own, the number one thing you've got to do is make sure you cover everything. And I am always amazed at how many people do not. I think I just clicked on the wrong thing.
No, you're good, John. We can see.
Okay, on my screen it's showing a Zoom deal. You've got to make sure you've got the general conditions of the contract. This is what's at the very front of the contract. And if you don't have that, how are you going to know things like where? Sorry. Okay, I'm in the wrong. Excuse me, I've got to do this again. Well, how are you going to know if there's a bond on the job? Because bid bonds are free, but if you're at my group, performance bond or payment bond is very expensive. If you don't know the special or supplementary conditions, how are you going to know things like, do you have prevailing wages on the job? If you're a union company, it may not mean so much to you. If you're an independent company in a merit shop, that can mean a whole lot of money you're not putting in your bids you need to. It can affect unions as well, but you just have to be sure, is that part of it? Because it's a lot of paperwork that goes with the job. What are the alternates? Is there an alternate to delete the elevator, to add the elevator, to add a floor to the building? Is there an alternate to add number 8 bronze? Very expensive items, that you need to make sure are not in these drawings. And a big one's always schedule. If you don't look for the schedule of the project, what are you going to do when you find out it's a 9-month accelerated job with a $5,000 a day penalty attached to it if you don't finish? Worse, or just as bad these days, what if you find out it's a 3-year job, the elevator's not going to ship for 3 years, and you've got to honor the price you're giving them today, which is hard enough to do. And then there's my favorite add-on that I love to take exception to, composite cleanup crew. Who on earth in the elevator business has time to send a guy to clean up somebody else's mess for half a day? Those things are just annoying, but you have to make sure you cover all of those items or you're going to get stuck with it. And nobody wants to do that. What I'm doing is, this is kind of a common sense estimate again, just making sure you're hitting things and not doing stuff on bar napkins or just throwing a number out there. And then if I get it, I'll put it together. But just a way to do things. Unfortunately, the place you start is up here at the top, making sure you have the right job names. You've got to make sure you know where the job is. I check jobs occasionally with people, and where's the job? I don't know. Well, does it have travel? Oh no, it's there. It's pretty close. Okay, can you get there from here? We go into West Virginia, and there's no way to go anywhere straight, and you've got a lot of travel time. But the biggest one is right here, and that's overhead. Your burden on your labor. This is where most elevator companies put this. Anything they're bidding, not timing of a number, you've got your base rate to pay your people, but you have to add that overhead in there. Unfortunately, to do this is a whole 1-hour class on its own. I know that, and shout out to Rudy Boyance, who I know is in the audience. I'm going to thank you again. At the Sarasota Spring Conference, we learned how to do this, how to figure out what your burden is on your payroll and how to figure that. Luckily for us, this was also became an article in the July Elevator World. So I highly recommend you go read Rudy's article, copy it, and give it to all your managers, give it to all your superintendents. Let them understand why, just because we put this many hours on something, where these dollars are, so they don't see a bunch of dollars. No, they can't spend that on something else. The other big one that we're really here to talk about is how do you show your costings? So when we do this at our company, we came up with a very large and long list of items of everything I could sit down and think of that I may want to price for an elevator. But instead of going through there on every job, then we broke it down into smaller pieces. In this first example, I'm kind of basing it on what Chris showed with one front car and one front and rear car. It's a holeless hydraulic package. So I start with my holeless hydraulic package. That's the lowest job number. Then your base materials are all in the thousands, extra materials in the 2,000s and 3,000s. Odd things like per diems and labors before, the miscellaneous is 5, all the way down through labor, all my different kinds of labor in the 9,000 series. What that does for you is it gives you a consistency. Instead of just throwing a number at it, you've got a consistent area of where you know this is in the right place. Because when it comes down to doing your estimate, if you'll come back over here and add these numbers as an item, that way down the road when you're writing purchase orders, you can put your job number and you can put your cost code in there. And if you can, the best thing you can do is have your field people put those same cost codes in there or a similar cost code that say, we were working on the group 1 package for the first week. We started wiring, so we're adding the wiring numbers in there. We did the cab finishes, so we've got that number there. Tie these things together to give you an idea of not only where your purchase orders are going, but exactly where your labor is going as well. Now, this example, what I've done is because it is a package job, a kind of cookie cutter thing, instead of putting all these labor hours in individually, I went ahead and just have one base number. And I'll get to that in a second. But let's say I've got my elevator package. And one thing all my people have to do is get at least 2 prices, if not 3. Because in this day and age, you don't know what the prices are. Nobody knows what today's price is. And just because brand X has been low for the last 2 weeks, for the next month, it may be brand Y. But just because brand Y is low doesn't mean they can deliver. Brand Z costs a little bit more, but they can deliver about 2 months earlier because they don't have to work. That number, as you all know right now, is rotating around, trying to figure out who's got the best deal for you. And the same thing with jobs. You have to look at it. Yeah, brand Z, I can get it quicker, but it takes me a week and a half longer to install. There's a lot of things you have to weigh and measure when you're determining what package you're going to use. But you've got a package. In my case, my total cost for this package is $112,000. I just put that in there. But you're seeing a front car and a rear car. Maybe you want to put elevator package, elevator 1, and put the correct price on there. Say it's $60,000. But on the elevator number 2, which just has frozen up, means it's going to be, do the math in my head real quick, $52,000 to come up with that 112. You need to know where that's going to be. And in this example, what we do is we add the taxes here. We're going to say yes to tax, and that way the Tennessee tax comes in there, and that will show up in the top line. It'll all go upwards so you can see what your prices are. Same thing with oil. When we buy a package elevator, we want to buy the oil separately because we don't want to pay shipping on it. We're going to add a little bit for pipe and fittings. Again, we're going to put taxes in there. Telephone, most of the time you're going to buy it as a package, but maybe you aren't going to buy it. Maybe it's not going to come because you've got a special phone or you've got a deal with another vendor. So maybe you're going to add that price in there. In this case, we're not. And so if we're going to bid this, I'll probably leave it in here with just zeros in there. But at the time it comes to book it, so nobody gets confused, I'll just take that line out of it. Just like I take these others like rails, drilling, PVC. We're not buying any of that. These are all zeros. Miscellaneous materials. I always do this in 2 different ways. One, I do materials so I can add tax to them. And then I have miscellaneous expenses. That ubu, whoops money. Go put a little money in there, but I'm not going to charge tax on it because I'm hoping I just flat won't use it. That's just a little extra money in the job. And just to say this, none of these numbers on this frame are anywhere near real. You did find out how I bid jobs. This is all make-believe numbers on here. Permits in Tennessee, a permit's $400. Now, I know a lot of you people, especially out west and up north, you've got a permit, you've got a test, you may have a local city permit, you may have a whole bunch of these. So you'll have 8,000 for your permit, 8,100 is going to be your test, and 8,200 is going to be your city permit. You just put those in there, but make sure these things are listed so you know where your money's going. Freight is turned into a big deal. For a number of years when I first moved back to East Tennessee, it was $900. 5 years ago, we bumped it up to $1,200 because the prices had gone up. But today, who knows? With diesel cost and everything else, we don't know where stuff's coming from or if we're going to get it. If you were with us in the town hall last time on supply chain, it was highly recommended by our expert that you don't go through a broker, that you don't get a blanket cost, that you try to look at what your costs are every time and make a deal with the truck company each time, and you'll get better pricing by doing that. Now, it's hard to do that on a bid job because you got so many of them, but this is the one time I'd say go back to the last one that shipped. Go back to the last job you had and kind of use that number. Do you have lodging? Do you have per diem? If you have per diem, make sure that your units, your daily cost is matching up to what your hours are. Labor is a funny one for so many people because a lot of people just like, well, it always takes 3 weeks to put in a 3-stop. That's that rule of thumb we always use. Well, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. And then I bet a lot of y'all have experienced this. You go up to your superintendent and say, how long is it going to take you to put in a 3-stop holeless hydro? Well, I can do it in 2 weeks. That's great. Are you going to put the elevator in? Well, no. Then how long does one of your average people, not your best team, not your worst team, how long is it going to take the average team to put this in? Oh, that's 3 weeks for sure. Okay. They always say that because they're thinking what they could do it in instead of going back to what the other people do it. Because let's face it, all your superintendents can do everything faster and better than everybody else. In this case, we're using a blended team rate to do our estimating. So we've got both elevators in here to come up with this number. I have startup engineering on here. In modernization, it means one thing. This is something we rarely use. This is if you're putting an elevator in an existing building. You know you're going to spend a lot of time on the job on the front end measuring because you don't trust the drawings. You want to make sure everything goes in right. Remote machine rooms takes more time. Now, going back to the example, we've got a rear door. It's only one, but I want to make sure we had extra money in there to put the rear door in, put the door operators, et cetera, on there. So we've got to add that money. Put in a little trickle because in this application, they want hall position indicators on all 3 floors. You may have things that you want to add on. That's fine. Just give them a number that's consistent, and then make sure you do this consistently across the board. So we've come up with some numbers up here, and the way we did this, set up this spreadsheet, is so we see all the numbers up here in one spot, so we don't have to dig around for them. We can see them up here. We've got all our material costs there. A line that tells me what my hours are, what my labor is, and now I've got a subtotal. Now I got to put that ugly overhead number on there. Maybe you're going to add that to your labor number down here. That's fine. In this case, we're doing it this way. We can see where overhead is, and you know it's hard to sell. It's hard to sell new sales, so we've got a small profit on here. We've got to add our sales tax, and that gives us our total price. I was taught, and I teach from here on out, I always want to know what my lowest number is. That's not necessarily my bid price. I may look at that number and I may think, well, I've got the last 3 jobs. I'm going to bid 380. Except to Billy Bob. I like Billy Bob. He gets priced at 370. Okay, but I'm still way above. I still hadn't hit my bottom dollar price. Now, if Billy Bob gets the job, and because we're such good friends, he comes back to put the screws to me. I've got somewhere to sink down on and can get down to anything above this price is a win for me. But if you're doing a modernization job, you're going to have the same things apply. But if you look over here, instead of having those few items that I did in new sales, I've got 50 items to start from just to work on a mod job. I start with my controllers because without a controller, it's not going to be a modernization job. And so I'm doubling. In this instance, I'm doing it differently. I'm doing this by man hours. I've got a man hour rate, and I'm doing this by man hours, man on the job. There's a blended rate there, but I want to see exactly what my hours are to do each part of this. So we're going to replace geared machines. I want to say this is going to take about 24 hours, 3 days to get those machines hoisted up. The other ones out there to get these put in place. That's going to take me about 3 days per car. And I can put that in here like this so I can track that. And then I can track and see how my installation crew's doing that. The motor came with it, but I just want everybody to know that. So I'm going to put the motor in there. There's no dollar value on here because it's included up here. One thing I see, this other number right there, I want to help my coordinators out. So I'm putting the estimate number in there with it. So when they go back and see that Zippity Doo made the controllers, they'll see that it was this estimate. In case I've got more than one estimate, they'll know which estimate I was using. Same thing, I've got a rope break in there. I could have just said included. In this case, I'm pretending like I'm buying it out from somebody else. And then you just start going down the line. How long is it going to take me to put a rope break in? I've got governor ropes. How long is it going to take to put governor ropes in? All these are taxable. As we work our way down through the fixtures, everything's the same. But I'm still using these same cost code numbers that I did on a hydraulic elevator. I'm just using more of them and maybe some different ones. By doing this, I'm just staying consistent. It makes it easier if you've got your own estimating program. By doing this, you can keep up with them. I just want to know how much I spent on freight for calendar year 2022. I can look off all my 6,000s. I can probably do this if I'm still just doing Excel sheets. If I'm running them together, I can still search them out that way. Does that make sense? I hope so. Again, so that gives me the material, labor, everything adds up together. Now I know what my bottom dollar price is that I want to bid on. One other thing I didn't talk about before, service, in a new installation service, warranty service, the misnomer free service. You got to put money in there for these things. How much you put in there depends on what you're doing. But I always want this number where I can pull it out. Because if you don't, if you put it in labor, your superintendent's going to tell you, hey, we turned back 8 hours on that job. Yeah, and they spent 16 of your free service hours on it. You want to make sure this number comes out, and you should be able to pull it out so that's actually used during your warranty service period. And that way you can track it. And that also helps you to see that if in your first 3 months over turnover, you're spending all your NIS money, you probably shouldn't have turned that elevator over when you did. It wasn't complete. Just there's so many different things you can learn by doing proper costing. And real quick, same thing applies to a fixed price or open order job. You just come in here and click on this. You're going to put door operator, 2019 microlights, door restrictor, car door. You're going to add your dollars in here. It's going to pop up, but you're going to add the correct cost codes in here at the same time. All this is common sense, is simple, but it's also something that salespeople don't want to do because we want to work fast. We want to get it over with. Somebody else will take care of it. It's a bad idea. And you cannot do proper cost accounting unless you do these job costings on the front end. If somebody's interested in this thing, I'll be happy to provide this as a blank if maybe you need something to play with. There's nothing special about it, but it is already set up, and I'll be happy to send that to you. Just send me an email on that. That's all I've got. I know it was quick.
Well, thanks, Sean. First thing, if you get this job, make sure you send me my commission check, okay? So
Okay, I'll get that.
That's the first thing. If you end up getting this, so there you go. We'll have to figure out what my rate is. We haven't discussed that, but your first slide, which talked about the general conditions section, which kind of picked up a little bit where Chris left off there. That can be kind of a catch-all kind of area in a spec, right? And I guess I would say, maybe this is going to affect greener sales reps as opposed to more seasoned ones. But how are you trying to mitigate that risk, if you would, or how are you trying to streamline the process for folks? Larger firms, they might have some in-house counsel or something that reviews this kind of stuff. But for some of the other folks, how are you recommending that you go through that? And I don't know if the question is around streamlining and or just kind of mitigating that risk, if that makes sense.
Spend the time where you have a great idea of what average general conditions are and average special conditions are. And you could run in there and do a quick PDF search for the word elevator, but the problem is it doesn't show up on schedules. It doesn't show up on bonds. So what I always try to teach people is I don't look for, I look for words. So start by just going to, and I don't have one open, but I would just go to the index. You start with the index. There's so many, you don't care about the weather. You don't care about calendar days. There's so many things you don't care about. So I'm going to go in there. I'm looking for the words bonds. I am especially looking for Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage. I want to find that in the index. I want either the supplemental or the other. I may do a word search on that one. And I'm looking for schedules. Those things come up really big. And the composite cleanup crew. But we'll take exception to that. Before we start talking about elevator equipment, I always take exception to these things in the top of the first thing coming out of the contract. I also make sure, and most of the big companies do the same thing. Also put in my bid letter that our bid is to be made part of the contract. That gives you some space to fight on down the road.
Second question, which I know the answer to the question. I'm just trying to highlight a point from your presentation on this. You spent a fair amount of time talking about your overhead, and you could also say labor burden. And there's some different ways to go about doing that. It looks like you use a percentage. Is that correct? Or how do you come across?
I'm using a percentage in this example.
Okay.
Because that percentage equals 45 cents, basically.
And how often are you going to kind of review and adjust those numbers?
Not often enough, but in the last 3 years, we've had to do it quite a bit because gas prices. And then you have to kind of, where's the crystal ball that when, okay, I paid 309, the average price of Knox was 319. 4 months ago, it was right at $4. You kind of, am I going to change it? I'm going to wait to make sure. So at least twice a year, I'm sure people, and we're not big enough to have somebody who's doing this all the time. When I say I'm doing it, I'm doing it. You know, if you've got enough people around where they can keep an eye on it, but you can't change it all the time because it is a number that fluctuates. But you don't want to do the same thing for 3 or 4 years, which a lot of companies do. Just put $50 on there, we'll be good.
Well, John, I appreciate you taking the time to go through that with us today. There was a question from the audience, which I'll just respond to. As a reminder, this town hall presentation is recorded. It's going to be posted on NAEC.org. And the slides from today's presentation, we can also pull them together, and they are also going to be made available on NAEC.org under the town hall series. In this case, we can try to get it directly to the individual that was asking the question as well. So John, thank you. And now I'm going to introduce our last speaker, Karen Kennedy Dodds. Karen is the current CEO of Kencor LLC, an American Elevator Group company. Karen received her Bachelor of Arts degree in communication from the College of Charleston in 2004. And her master's in business from Westchester University in 2011. Karen began her tenure at Kencor by working in the field in 2004, continued on through to administration, general manager, and executive VP. In 2019, Karen became the CEO of Kencor. From 2008 through 2012, Karen was the executive director for the Merit Elevator Contractors Association of America, where she traveled the country fighting for equitable elevator mechanics licensing, utilizing our very own CET program. In 2012, she became the chairperson of the Elevator Contractors Council with the Associated Builders and Contractors. Karen is also the current treasurer for the NAEC and an acting board of directors member. Now, out of all of her accolades, I'm sure when you ask Karen what she's most proud of is being married to John Dodds, who I understand is just an exceptional, individual. So congratulations on that. But in all seriousness, I believe she would answer the question, which she's most proud of is her family, her two beautiful daughters who are 6 and 8, and her stepson who's 25. So Karen, it's great to see you. I mean, I see you all the time, but it's really nice to see you again. And thanks for taking the time to join us today. And I am going to turn this over to you.
Okay. I'm going to take the awkward 2 minutes to find my screen. And we will go from there. Thank you so much for having me. And the introduction, JD, thank you. So today I'm going to go over some job cost reviews that can be really useful in a company that may have multi-dimensional departments or just a 1 or 2 person office. And it really can be applied regardless of your company size. Job cost review and job costing itself is almost a universal tool that can be used in every department, right? It's something that can be reviewed in purchasing and project management and sales and in management itself and in the field if managed properly. So I'm going to go through some tools that you should use in order to manage the job costing reporting so it's useful and dependable throughout the company. So I wanted to put some job costing absolutes. So, in the independent elevator industry, we see, if you go from business to business, we see a lot of things we do the same and many things that we do different. So I wanted to go through some absolutes that really should be applied regardless of your company and how you do things, because it really can allow you to measure the profitability of the job itself, as well as the performance of your company and your departmental leads as well. So the first and foremost, your original estimate that you use to bid a job should absolutely be locked in your system once that you have your contract execution. This allows for obviously evaluation of inconsistencies in actual costs. Maybe you were charged more from a vendor. Maybe you provided, maybe you double ordered something or double received something and weren't aware of it. It shows estimating errors and or performance errors and successes. So, it really can show you in real time the performance of a job as it starts and as it ends, right? So you really want to look at the job cost report in the beginning, middle, and end, because you're getting real-time information that can show you that if there may be an issue on a job. So you have an opportunity to fix it. If there are changes throughout a job, and I would say, Kencor being a company that does both new construction and mod, there are always going to be changes in a job. And it's important that although your original estimate is locked, that you update your estimate in order to reflect the changes that you should expect in the upcoming future. So a way to do this, and a way we do this, and I think most systems in our industry can do this, is that you do an internal change order in order to update the estimate, but it won't change the original estimate. And this allows you to review both in upper management and in sales, where you said I may have missed something, or you have multiple change orders on a job. You can click on it and you can see where the changes needed to be made and why. It's a good way to document where things went differently as expected from when you originally booked the job to when it actually started, you actually started performing. And the estimate management throughout the life cycle job is really imperative for your work in process calculation. And I can't see everybody, but I'm sure 50% of the people on this call just rolled their eyes thinking about work in process calculation. And I'm sure it's a whole conversation that could take another hour and a half. So I'll talk about it briefly in another slide, but it's really imperative if you're doing WIP accounting, either quarterly, semi-annually, monthly, you want to have accurate estimates. So once you start buying out the job, you want to make sure that your committed costs match your estimated costs. And so when you're sending out a PO and it's not matching what you estimated in the original estimate, you really need to look at that as to why. Did the vendor change something? Did the pricing change that you really need to go back to the supplier and negotiate? Did you miss something along those lines? But if it does not match your estimated costs, there's something wrong. There's some sort of disconnect between maybe the project management team and the sales team. Again, it's a form of communication that and shows indicators from one department to the other, and it really should be managed in real time. So if you're issuing a purchase order and it does not match what the sales team originally estimated, it's time for you to get up off your seat and go find out why. So this is what I mean as far as the previous slide, as far as updating your estimate and through internal change orders. So again, I'm just like John, I kind of made up a mock estimate here, right? So my original estimate for package equipment was $38,000. Come to find out, I missed, I don't know, groutless sills, something that would increase the cost. It was on me, it's my fault. So it wouldn't change the contract. So I did an approved change order internally in order to update my estimate. And my committed cost, yeah, it's $36 more, but it's within reason. My committed cost, which is my purchase order, equal my job to date cost. Now, if that didn't match, then I would want to go find out as to why and what went wrong. I think, and this is a personal opinion, and it's really benefited myself as well as Kencor employees, that I share my job costing financial information with assigned field personnel. I'm not showing them financials, P&Ls, things like that. But I'm showing them the cost estimate as to, you're about to start a job. Here's what I bid. I bid, 480 hours. Do you have a problem making that timeline? Here's what you have in miscellaneous material. So you're not going to Home Depot every other day to buy miscellaneous material and putting it to the job. And, here's what we have in mileage and hotels and things like that. And they have to sign off on that. And they have to agree to the estimate. And if they have any kind of opposing opinions about it, then that before we start the job, it gives us an opportunity to discuss it. Now with this, when they sign off on the job, they've really taken ownership of it, right? So if they have a truck driver that's sitting around because they've got 4 hours to kill and they don't want to go back to the shop and they're sitting on their job, that mechanic's kicking him off the job because he doesn't want the hours put to that job, right? He's managing his hours. He's managing additional expenses that he or she may not have been so careful to manage if he didn't have the job estimate at hand and agree to it. So again, the job estimate can be very valuable if provided to field personnel. It also, it does provide performance expectations from the beginning. So if you run over on hours and you had no communication as to why, you really can have a conversation with that mechanic and say, for next time, I really need you to be clear on if there's any kind of trouble in the field that we need to mitigate in order to prevent any additional delay. So it's really a learning tool too, as well, for when you go over hours. Now, when you go under hours, which I love, I use this as a performance evaluation. When it's time to give that person a performance evaluation, we bring in and say, how'd you do on hours on the jobs? And it's a clear visibility of, what they agreed to versus how they performed. And it's a good tool to use when you bring them in for their annual increase. So this, I guess, is very important, especially in today's time. I know we're all dealing with today's deflationary economy, and it's so chaotic and volatile as far as pricing. And I'm not just talking on the large equipment. I'm talking about the ancillary materials that we've been estimating for years in our head, right? Freight will cost me $2,500. Well, that's not the case anymore. Oil is double the price that it was 2 years ago. Lodging has increased, inserts have increased, couplings, anything you can think of have increased, right? So you really need to see trends in your previous jobs to see if those ancillary materials have gone up in recent history, and if it's maybe makes sense to re-estimate everything or use new pricing. Your blended labor rates, and what I mean blended labor rate is if you don't use, say, a mechanic and a helper, you have a blended labor rate when you put mechanic and helper rate together. Should be evaluated regularly, as John was saying in his previous presentation, and it should be updated for future estimating. A big indicator that your labor rate is not correct is that if you're coming in either at or under hours, then you're going over on total cost. And if you see that you're consistently doing this, I would suggest that you give this immediate attention and either try to get a change order for future jobs, because it probably will hit you consistently throughout the year, or most definitely change your labor rates for future estimating. So I made up a mock estimate here as well, and I've got to move you guys because I have some notes on here that I can't see. All right. So I put this estimate together and I said, all right, so I'm going to use my original estimate. And if you see, this is what I call ish estimating. The cabs are going to cost me $12,000 ish, right? Controllers will be $6 grand ish. And so the total estimate for material came at $47,200. When we give our total committed and we find out that we're about 10,000 under, we're not going to need the safety platform. We're not going to put door panels in, right? We're at 37,000. As you see, I didn't make any approved changes to reduce my total estimate, my revised estimate. Now, what does that mean? It means when I receive the equipment, which I have here, right? It will not allow me to pull through earned revenue that I've earned on the job. So there's a big bunch of money sitting in the estimate. And because my actuals don't, and my estimate is higher than my actuals will ever be, I won't be able to earn that revenue until the end of the job. So by updating this estimate and saying my materials are actually going to cost me $37,000, then I will be able to earn more throughout that period through my WIP. What else happens throughout the duration of the job? Well, I can see what I missed on estimating. I missed estimating my permits, fees, and bonds. It actually cost me $2,100, and I didn't estimate for that. I can see where immediately where the issue is. I estimated for use tax only to find out that this job was tax exempt. Let's see here, I have to move again. But I estimated for 520 hours and I came in at 377. I need to call this mechanic and congratulate them. These are things that I can use throughout the life cycle of the job and see where any issues on a management level may arise. But in the same sense, it's also an active tool that all of my departments have access to see, whether they've received material, whether they've can close out the job because they've received all bills. As on a management level, it's a great way to see how the company itself is doing on a job-to-job level. I'm sorry. I don't know, I get to the next slide. Oh, here we go. Job closing. So it's really important that although you're managing the job throughout its life cycle using the job costing, once the job is done, it's really important to sit down with the necessary parties to really have a de-scope meeting in regards to each individual job. What does this do? It allows you to go over the successes as well as go over the things that you could have done better, right? So if you've missed something on the estimate, if you didn't put enough hours on this as an estimator on the job, if you didn't put enough hours for demo, things like that, you really need to have a de-scope meeting from the field to management and every department in between and go over each job to see what you can do better. And before you close a job, it's really imperative that in order to close it, that you ensure that you've received all of your committed costs. And if you haven't, you need to find out if that's going to be coming in the future. Because usually when you've closed a job, you're taking it off the WIP and you're going to have late costs with no additional earned revenue. So you really want to make sure that you've received everything on your estimate and or if you're going to. And in summary, I'm sorry I didn't take as long as everybody else. I'm short and to the point, but in my personal opinion, the most valuable aspect of evaluating the company's performance is the job costing procedure. It captures successes and inefficiencies throughout all departments. It's a universal tool that can be used by field personnel, management, and back office in real time. If properly maintained, which is really important, it must be properly maintained and utilized. Job costing can be a major contributor to the success and growth of your business. That's all I got, JD.
Thanks, Karen. Maybe I'll just spend a couple minutes on a few slides back. It was your job cost summary slide. So how often is your team, kind of going through and reviewing these job cost summaries?
It depends who it is, right? So we are reviewing it for all of our billing meetings, which is twice a month. In our our PMs and our field managers are supposed to be reviewing it every week in our job meetings. Now, as a manager, I can tell you personally, I'm probably looking at them in total, probably once or twice a month, but I am looking at individual jobs on the daily.
So you've touched on this, but just to re-highlight it, because my personal opinion, I do think it's very important. So maybe just talk to everybody again, or re-emphasize the importance of starting, with a good job cost estimate, or maybe another way to ask the question is, what happens when we do just guesstimate the job? I mean, as John mentioned in his deck, we have a few adages in the elevator industry. 3 stops going to take 3 weeks. My selling price should just be double my material price. So when we have, sales folks who are kind of taking that approach, what does that do to the life of the project? And really, how does that affect WIP?
It hugely affects WIP. So in my personal opinion, and I'm saying ish estimating because that's what I used to tell my dad, and I know he's on here. So he used to say, cabs are going to cost me some X. I know this is going to cost me Y and times 2. And we didn't have official estimates. It was the back of the napkin, and we didn't have a ton of cost codes. If we were still doing that today, and if I still was not, if I was still using the back of a napkin today, it could very well put a company out of business, because pricing today is so volatile. If there's one thing you cannot depend on, it's pricing in our industry. It is changing every day on a weekly basis. An estimate that you received 2 weeks ago is not being honored because of inflation. So, if you are doing an estimate, you better make sure that you've priced it out, you've gotten your estimates from your vendors, and you're not going off of past experience. And if you do that, then your estimate should be pretty, aside from the labor, which is pretty variable, your estimate should be pretty solid.
Yeah, no, it does. Again, I'm just going to highlight one more comment that I picked out from your presentation that I think is important. And, I kind of chuckled because I know we struggle with this, and I would imagine many other folks do as well. So when I'm the salesperson and I put my estimate together, and then I find out that I made a mistake, like, do I just go in and change my line, the number that I had on my line item, or is the more appropriate way to make sure that you kind of lock down that estimate, and then utilize that change order process?
Yeah. So, I said it's my first absolute is your original estimate should never change. If you need to make a change for whatever reason it is, even if you made a mistake, you should have visibility on why you're making changes. Because if you come and say, hey, I bid this on 18% and you change the original estimate and it turns out to be 12, well, why'd we do that? And it was maybe because a PM did something wrong or something was ordered. It's not necessarily the salesperson's job. So you need visibility in order to really have accountability within your departments. So an original estimate stays the same, and you do internal change orders in order to follow any kind of changes from the original estimate to have your total estimate.
Great. Thanks. And thanks for taking your time, Karen, to share your expertise with the group. We have a few more minutes left. I don't see any questions in the Q&A window. If anybody has any, please go ahead and throw them in real fast. If not, I'm going to circle back, and this is a question for Karen and John, and Chris, if you want to chime in, feel free. Karen, I saw you had a list of a bunch of different cost codes. John, you had a shorter list of cost codes for your NI work, longer list of cost codes for your mod. What is the appropriate number? Is there an appropriate number of cost codes and detail? And that's for the group.
The problem with coming up with an appropriate number is we grow. We have so many new products that have so many new pieces, parts in. in theory, I need a 2019, a bunch of 2019 items because 2019 code has changed things. It can't just be a phone. It's got to be a 2019 phone. It's got to be a 2019 door opening system. So those change. But again, it kind of goes back to, you could, if you're a small company, you just may want to say phones. You just may want to say elevator package. You can take it down to what fits your company, just knowing that as you grow, you need to expand these things. At least that's my opinion on it.
I think consistency is the only thing that's important, whether you have 10 or 100, right? So
Yes.
consistency is important as far as what is going to go into those cost codes. If you need more detail, you need more cost codes in order to be accurate, then have that. But if you have, 10 to 15 cost codes and you're able to still be accurate, well, that's fine too. But you're also not going to, if you limit yourself to the amount of cost codes you have, you're not going to really be able to drill down on if something goes wrong in the estimate immediately. You really have to look into it and say, okay, well, I have, 10 different things in miscellaneous material, whether it's your pipe and wire and your couplings and your trough or whatever it is. You really have to go into that one cost code and figure out where you went off, right? Whereas if you itemize that in different cost codes throughout the estimate, you would be able to immediately see as to why your estimate was off from your actuals.
All right,
She
great,
said something
thank
that
you.
made me perk, and I hate to air my own dirty laundry, but I need to add cost codes in my miscellaneous like that, because ours just says miscellaneous. And the worst thing I ever hate to see is Home Depot and miscellaneous, because what did you go buy? How many of you went? You can't help it. I'm going to be sexist. For the most part, you're guys. Gals do the same thing. If you walk in Home Depot, you can't just go buy the screw you need. Your eye's going to be caught on, ooh, DeWalt has a new drill. Oh, look at this. So how much time have I lost by that trip? And especially if you're a union company, both your helper and your mechanic went. So sometimes bringing that down, it'd be a whole lot easier to say that had to go there to buy a hammer. Something that tells tools, screws, paint, whatever it is, would make my life a little easier, so I don't have to go hunting and searching for it. It becomes what's cost effective with my time or somebody else's time versus figuring out what's going on.
Great, thank you guys. Before we wrap, I just want to thank the participants who joined us today. We had a pretty good group. I think it was as high as 60 or so people. I know that it certainly is easier at times to just go back and watch these recordings after the fact, but I think for me personally, and I'm sure the panelists, it's always nice to have a good group of participants and attendees. So thank you for everyone who joined today. And as always, out of respect for everybody's time, we're going to call this the end of our town hall event. And I appreciate everyone that joined us today. Especially appreciate the panelists who took their time to be with us and put their decks together. And then obviously thanks to everyone else, and we wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.